Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way.
We're back, and we're only a month late like we usually are. Man, maybe I'll just keep these to a month instead of a week, because I am way too inconsistent with it. Oh, but anyway, let's dive into the story, which is about a Tongan proverb. It's one of the sayings we have in Tongan, and honestly, I didn't know about it until about 2-3 weeks ago. I had no idea what this thing was until my mom, she said this thing. I was like, what is that? And she explained the whole thing. But to explain the story, growing up, we moved around a ton. When I was in 3rd grade, I went to 5 different schools, 5 different elementary schools. And it was across 3 states. So you could tell I moved a ton as a kid. And one of the places where I moved to was Oregon. And in Oregon, I was there for about 6, 8-ish years. Notice how I didn't say 7 there? But I was there for a good while, from elementary to middle school, and then finally left for high school. But while I was there, one of the friend groups we had was one of the groups at church. And it was this little friend group. We got really close with them and we're good friends with them. But after I moved to Vegas from Oregon, I really wasn't into social media or anything. And so I didn't keep in touch with anyone. So really all the connections I had made in Oregon were basically just cut. Like, I was not close with them at all after that. And a big reason for that was because I didn't have social media. So years passed. Keep in mind, I'm a senior now in college. So it's been almost since Oregon and since I've had like any type of contact with all those people. So 8 years pass and I'm over here. I get this text from my mom, and the text mentions how one of the boys who I kind of grew up with and was really close with as a kid, he actually passed. And that kid, he was around my same age. He was only 2 months younger than me, which is kind of crazy to think about. So like, I heard those words and a ton of things were coming to mind. First of all, super young. Second of all, like, especially lately, I think I've been thinking a lot about like the concept of death and life and how short of a time we have on this earth, which is super like existential, but that's where my mind goes to. And the other thing I was thinking about was the funeral, because I was so busy with so much stuff with work and school and all the other things that I had going on in my life, that I was like, yeah, I'm in Chicago, like I won't be able to make it to the funeral, but man, I hope it goes well for them. Especially being that I'm not really close with him anymore. Yes, sure, I used to be close with him when I was a kid, but I literally haven't talked to him in more than 8 years. So I was like, okay, condolences to the family, like, hopefully they'll be okay. And my mom texts my entire family, the group chat, and she's like, okay, who's coming? And I come to find out, literally every single one of my siblings said, yes, we're gonna go, we're gonna show up. And I was so confused. I was like, what? Why would they show up for this person who, like, realistically, they're not close with him at all? And maybe you're listening to this and you're thinking like, dude, of course you'd want to go. But I was like, I'm just so busy with all this stuff. Like, it's just not something that I would fly out of my, because keep in mind, I'm in Chicago. Like, I would have to take this whole flight across the whole country just to make it out there. And so I call my family like I normally do, and I ask them, I'm like, hey, why are you going to this funeral? Like, genuinely, I'm trying to understand that, because you'd agree, right, that like you weren't super close with him. Like, why are you going? I asked my sister that, and she was like, because I feel for the mom, because it's a small thing, but it means so much. And my mom, she said the same thing. It was like, yeah, well, it's a small thing just showing up, but it means so much to them. And I learned the phrase small but mighty, small but great. It's like these small things that we can do, but there's so much power and there's so much impact that it has. And that was honestly like this beautiful lesson that I was like, wow. And so I was decided, you know what? Freak finals, freak work. I'ma just go and live this value of Seek Kai Ha. So I ended up going, and it was honestly a really, really interesting experience that I'll dive into later. Like, reuniting with these people who I haven't seen in literally 8 years, bro. But that is the big lesson for this episode. But moving on to doubles of the month. These are 2 dubs and 2 L's that I've taken over the past month, since that's when my last episode was. The first dub, it's kind of an interesting one. So one of the classes I'm taking, it's like a learning class. It's in our school called CESP, which I think is like social policy something else is what it stands for. But CESP, this is like the bottom of the barrel type of school. Like basically, if you find out someone else is in CESP, you're like, yeah, they don't care about grades or nothing. Like it's the easiest school to get into. Basically, that's the reputation it has on campus. So I was like, you know what? My senior year, none of my classes really matter. I just got to get credits. Let me take a CESP class. That's perfect. So I ended up taking this random CESP class that I honestly didn't care about at all. And so I'm in this class and I'm going through it. It's like whatever, literally the entire time. And this is the same way I am with all my classes. I just work. Like I literally just pull out my laptop and I'm just working the whole time, not even paying attention at all. And this is the same thing that I did with this class, with this CESP class. I would just work and work. And there's this one day in particular where I was kind of in charge of this project. And with the project, like I set everything up. I made sure everything would run smoothly. I was like, okay, it should be good. It should be all right. And then come the day of when this project is like going to be launched and live, all of a sudden, all these things come popping up. Like there's some errors that weren't caught and people were going through it, but they were finding some mistakes and some things needed to be added and changed and moved around. And all these things kept coming up for this project. And this was the day where I had 5 classes back to back. So it was literally like 6.5 hours of classes that I had back to back to back. So I can do work, but it's hard to really get that deep work in that I need, especially for projects like these where I have to be like super hands-on with it. So I decided, you know what, that day I'm gonna skip all my classes. And I did this a couple times, but I really had to lock in on this specific project, especially because like I was supposed to be the owner of this thing, and by being the owner, that means like taking the initiative and doing everything that needs to be done. And so I ended up skipping the class. I was like, yeah, I just won't go to any of my classes today. It's like, whatever, not a big deal. So a couple days pass and I show up to all my classes. And when I walk into the CESP class, I'm just going in, I put down my stuff, it's whatever. And then the professor kind of looks at me and she mouths this. And I didn't hear it, but she mouths it. She says, are you okay? Are you doing okay? And in that moment, I was like, what the? Kind of stood back for a second. I was like, what the? Here I was, like, whatever, waving this class off, like it didn't matter at all. Because really, it didn't matter in my head. Like, it honestly doesn't matter at all. But she asked that question. I was like, damn, she's literally the only professor ever to ask me that. Which is crazy now that I'm saying this out loud because it's a live realization. She is literally the only professor who has ever asked me that. Maybe the only teacher who's ever asked me that, period. And it was this like small, simple gesture. Maybe it comes back to the whole point of this episode. See, guy, how like it's this tiny little thing. It's like, are you okay? I was like, oh yeah, for sure. Like no biggie. But for some reason that day, like that small notion stuck with me so much. And so I emailed the professor later that day. I was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that just checking in on me, that actually meant a ton. And then I went to class I think 2 days after that, whenever we had our next class, and I thanked her in person. She was like, yeah, like I just asked you that because you didn't give me a heads up about being absent. And that doesn't really match your level of engagement with the class. And what she meant by that was I was honestly finding it hard not to engage and like get interested in the topic because it was a pretty interesting topic. Because usually in all my classes I would work is like whatever, try to zone them out. But in this class particularly, it was hard to really lock in on work because like the school stuff, I was like, oh, I kind of want to talk about this thing. Or I kind of want to debate about it. And so every now and then I would like go back and forth with the professor and then meet with them after class and ask them questions and try to like push them on certain ideas. But this was like a super interesting moment, honestly. Like this moment of realizing or understanding that this professor actually seems to care about me, like as a person and as a learner in this environment, which I thought was like super cool, honestly. So that was one big dub. And then another dub is that I decided to run a marathon. Let's go. I'm not sure if I already announced that in a past episode, but it's been super long, so I'm about to run another marathon in April with my sister in Salt Lake, which is cool because first of all, like, yes, I'm running another marathon. I'm about to get in shape again. Like, let's go. But second of all, like, it's so cool that I was able to convince my sister to run a marathon. Like, it's one of the things I was really looking forward to do is like help my siblings basically lock in. And now I'm helping my sister lock in. So that's pretty cool. Moving on to the L's. First major L, bro. I really got caught using AI. Oh my goodness. On one of the papers I turned in, it was my midterm paper. I got caught using AI. So I had to go through this whole thing. When I read the email, bro, I was freaking out. I was like actually scared out of my mind. Then I asked some friends, they're like, oh yeah, it's not a huge deal. They'll let you off with a warning, no biggie. And so I was like, oh my goodness, oh, finally, I don't have to stress out about that. And then I go and I meet with the dean, because that's part of the requirements, is meeting with the dean of the school. And so I meet with him, and this was honestly super weird, man. Like, this guy, he would be so condescending in the way he talked to me. It's like, bro, what? He would talk to me like I had no idea about AI and like what it's used for and like what it can do and what it can't do. Like all these different things that he was trying to be so condescending to me toward. And maybe it was just like my interpretation of it, but like I really did not like that guy. And it's funny because every single person I've asked about him, they all do not like him either. But the main point of why I bring this up is because it seemed so obvious and so clear to me that his hatred, like when I say hatred, I mean like he thinks AI is like completely immoral and like terrible for everyone everywhere. It's like, dang, he really hates AI that much. And he hates AI to the point where it truly is clouding his judgment about it. Like, it was interesting hearing him talk about AI in this way that I legit asked him, like, do you think it can be useful? And he was like, yeah, sure, like, it can be useful to output text. So I was like, okay, fair, yes. It can be useful to, like, output LinkedIn posts or emails or copywriting, whatever you need. But he said it's not useful for thinking. I was like, well, of course it is. Like, what? Of course it's useful for thinking. It was like, it was so interesting because he said, oh, like, it would be cool if AI could link to the source of where it got its information from. I was like, bro, have you never heard of Perplexity, dude? Like, they've been doing this since day one. It's like a year or 2 years ago, dude. So it's just so fascinating to hear how clouded his judgment is around this specific thing simply because he hates it so much and he's not willing to give it like the second look or second chance. And the second L is with work. So I've been put in charge now of this thing called UGC. It's called User Generated Content. And the basic rundown of what this is, it's like instead of on TikTok where you'll scroll through and every now and then TikTok will throw an ad at you where it's so blatantly obvious that that thing is an ad. It's like, dude, no one is ever gonna like buy this straight up ad that's like so obvious. So what UGC is, it's like very organic content that companies make. It's still an ad, but it's not so salesy. It's like, it's so organic and it's so normal and natural to whatever the platform is, like TikTok. It's such a normal TikTok video that its brief mention of whatever company or whatever product like fits so well with the platform that it's like, it basically is just a normal post. But it just so happens that if I'm interested, I can click on their profile and, oh, link in bio, boom, is their company, and I can go and buy from them super easily. Like, that's basically what UGC is. And it's very, very similar to like influencer marketing or like creator brand deals. But UGC specifically has been used a ton, especially by these big AI. So now with Leland, we have this thing called Leland Plus, and we're doing a bunch of expansions and improvements to our product and what we have. We have these AI modules. And so everyone's like, oh, of course. We'll just run the same playbook that everyone else is running on UGC for social media. We'll do the same thing, but for our AI modules in Leland Plus. And of course, everyone's like, oh, great idea. Like, it's already worked for other companies. Like, we'll just do that. And they're like, hey, Dean, why don't you run that? I'm like, guys, I'm not on social media, dude. The most social media I've ever done is on LinkedIn. And that, I'm not even sure that counts as social media. Like, what the heck? So that is probably the biggest L. Not the fact that they've forced me to run it, which I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm down, super down actually to expand my tool set and skills and experience or whatever. The tough thing is that I've been sucking at it, like absolutely terrible. Like really trying to understand this playbook, like what the heck do I run? How do I get this up and running and going? Especially being that I have almost no experience at all with social media. So I think that's been a pretty big L. It's like, man, trying to figure that thing out. So big lessons that I've had. So from this L of the UGC stuff, I've been diving a ton into UGC and social media to the point where like there's this app that I joined and I've literally just like, I'm like a, how do I say this? It feels like a spy because I'm going in and I'm learning all the things that they're teaching about UGC stuff. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna like steal this and take it. And also it's motivating me to like start a new series of like, I don't know, day in the life, or like what it's like building a startup. Something like that. Just showing what it's like to be at a startup. And the main motivation is really just to get better at social media. Get better at like the whole process of ideation, scripting, recording, editing, all the different stuff like that. And the big lesson I had with the AI thing, getting caught using AI, was that it's actually really nice to think. Because I think I've been outsourcing a lot of my actual thinking to AI. So it's to the point where if someone asks me to do something, like for example, like run this marketing campaign, my first thought isn't like, oh, what could the marketing campaign be? My first thought is a prompt that I can use to paste in the chat so I can brainstorm marketing ideas. Like it's gotten to the point where I'm literally thinking in prompts. And so for my final papers that I did, I was like pretty adamant on not using AI as much, or at least like I can use it, but not to the point where it's doing my thinking for me. And so it's been nice to like use my head again, which is great because it means like trying to think through certain scenarios and cases and talking with other people and getting their thoughts. Like all the stuff like that. So that is it for doubles of the week. Now moving on to the philosophizing section. These are random things that I've been thinking about. So the first thing is that I've been thinking a lot about how we rise to the level of our expectations. And what I mean by this is growing up, I feel like my parents raised me with a certain chip on my shoulder. And maybe it was the opposite, where because I would like express these certain things that I would do, that then they would place expectations on me. But to explain this, basically, ever since I was a kid, like where I can think back to was like, they've always expected me to have good grades. When I say good grades, I'm talking about like incredible, like straight A's type of grades. And then once I got to high school, of course, I was keeping straight A's in middle school, and then in high school, got into the private school. And then they started having this another expectation of, oh, like Dean's gonna be the one to make it out, or buy the house for our parents, like all these things. And so I kind of like took that expectation and ran with it and lived up to it in some ways. And I think it also happens at the inverse, where it's like, oh, if my expectation of my son or daughter is so terrible and lowly, then they'll live up to that expectation. And the reason I think about this is because in the context of school, with that Sesame class that I was talking about, it's like if teachers have this expectation, and they ran this study or this test where they told teachers in like 30 different classrooms, and they picked a random student. It didn't matter who the student was, but they picked a random student and they told the teacher, you should have high expectations of this student. And they did that across all these different classrooms. And what they found is that that specific student ended up doing amazing. And the reason why is because the teacher, they had these high expectations. So they would do these little things that were different. So maybe it would be more patient with the student, or give them a little more attention, or like tiny things like that. Or even if the student wasn't great and they wasn't like super smart, because the teacher had this high expectation, the student would end up living up to it. And I think the same thing goes in parenting, the same thing goes in like schools and students, and the same thing goes for us as individuals to ourselves. Because I think I'm a big believer in like having these expectations for ourselves and like really trying to live up to those. And if we don't, it's not like we're gonna like knock ourselves off and like, oh my goodness, I'm a terrible. But it's to have these expectations that we want to live up to. Or maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure about the individual level. Maybe it works more so with kids. Because I think as adults, it's more so like less about expectations and more about like actual systems and like what you actually get done. So I'm gonna have to think more on that one. Another thing I've been thinking about is something called inefficient productivity. It's my own personal term or coin for this phrase. But it's basically things that like on the surface, it looks inefficient or seems inefficient, but actually it's what makes me more productive. And the reason I was thinking about this was because when I was doing school full time on top of work, like it just took up so much of my time that I wouldn't have enough time to like do these other things, like working out or hanging out with friends, or like those typical like college things. And so for about a week or two, I really just didn't do any of that. I wasn't working out. I wasn't going out at night or like going out with friends or anything. It was literally just me, maybe in my room or maybe at the garage where I would work, and just grinding. And in my head, it was like, okay, like I need to get this work done. I need to be productive. So let me just do the work. Just wake up, brush my teeth, and boom, immediately start working. And after I'm done working, boom, I'm getting lunch. And then after another lunch, boom, back to work. Then after that, I'm back in my bed sleeping. Rinse and repeat, like it's the most productive routine ever. But what I found is that I get so like lost in the work, and I'm working so much that I'm not actually being efficient with my time. I'm not being productive. It's like, sure, I'm there at the computer, but what's the work? What's the output that's actually being made? And so what I found is that actually when I take the time to go for a walk or like work out or hang out with friends, that's super helpful because it helps me work more efficiently in the time that I am actually productive. So that's one thing I've been thinking about. And honestly, doing that more now has been pretty helpful. And then last thing for a philosophizing section is this idea that all outcomes flow through me. And it's just another way of like this pragmatic mindset where I take extreme ownership over everything. Even if it's really not my fault, I will still take ownership over it and like, yes, it is my fault. Because at least then I have some agency and some control over what happens because the outcomes flow through me. And the example of this is with the ambassador program. When I was like doing the ambassador program for Leland, I was putting all this work into building this program, but it ended up just completely flopping. Like I put hours and hours and hours of work into this thing, but it just like kind of flopped. ROI was not there. And I could be like, oh, ambassador programs don't work. Oh, the ambassadors, like they sucked. It's all their fault. But it's like, no, the reason it didn't work and the reason this program sucked is because of me. Those outcomes were my fault and they flow through me. So it's not like pointing the finger and blaming them like it's their fault. It's like pointing the finger back at myself and figuring out like, what can I do next? What can I learn from this to make it better so that it actually does work? That's another thing I've been thinking about. Man, as I'm saying all this out loud, bro, I really should just start recording on video as well. So that way, I don't have to re-record all this stuff. Oh, I might start doing that from now on. Because the most important thing with all these videos or social media in general is the hook. And so if I just have this as like the actual content of the video, and then I just record the hook like later after I figure out what I want the video to be about. Oh, that's kind of smart. Wait, low-key, that might be the move. Okay, noted. I'll do that on my next episode because I'm already so far into this episode. But moving on to the weekly roundup, these are random finds I had throughout the week. Could be a question, a book, a quote, whatever. So the first thing is this article that I found. It was by this 20-year-old who works for Alex Hormozi. For some reason, it always comes back to that guy. But he went to UIUC, which is University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Actually, a school that I got rejected by. Fun fact. But he went to that school and he was just writing this article about like all the different lessons he learned in his 20s. And it was actually like a pretty good article, I can't lie. None of it was like super like original, like, oh, no one's ever thought about this ever before. But I think the way he explained it was like pretty great, honestly. So that was a good article. A quote from that article that I really liked was, your inability to focus will hurt you more than your lack of talent. And I thought this was a great one because like focus is really the name of the game, bro. And focus can outwork talent like any day. Because if you're focused enough, if you work hard enough, like that will outshine talent. Of course, talent was nice to have, but it's like focus is way better. And then a podcast that I was listening to is David Goggins on modern wisdom. And the book that I've been, or at least I read a couple chapters, is David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. Because I was kind of on this like David Goggins kick where I was trying to understand that guy. And I was always talk about him, but I would never like, I didn't really know about him. Never read his book, never listened to podcasts of his. So I was like, let me find out more about this guy. And then also, I was kind of going through it. Like I mentioned, those 2-ish weeks where I wasn't working out or anything, I was like, dang, what do I do? So I was like, man, I got to lock in. So I read his book, listened to a couple podcasts of him. First major takeaway, the man sounds so miserable. And of course, he would like listen to people like me. It's like, it's not that I'm criticizing him. It's that like, or maybe it is a criticism, but like it actually seems like an observation that I have. It's like, objectively, he does not seem happy. I think people have asked him straight up on a podcast where it was like, David Goggins, are you happy? And he's like, I'm not sad. He would say that. But like something along the lines of like, oh, it's not about being happy. It's about like achieving my goals and like killing the weakness inside my heart. But it's like, bro, you're not happy, dude. And maybe it's just like a different definition of happiness that he has, but he just seems very miserable. So that was one big takeaway. And honestly, that's like the only takeaway. I was reading this book. Yeah, he's gone through like so much hard stuff. And so I guess that was another thing where I looked at that and I'm like, man, if he can do that, freak, bro, I can at least do some things like I gotta lock in. But anyways, now for the life update. Final section of this podcast. These are an update on the four most important things in my life: my God, myself, my people, and my work, in that order. So first, starting with the update on my God. I've honestly been pushing this out for so long. Like pushing out the notion or idea that I have to do this, or like thinking about this whole topic in general, like the topic of my God. Because in this podcast, yes, I say it's like those are my four areas and I rank them in that order. But realistically, it's more of like those are what I wish they would be than anything. So the update here, honestly, is pretty like dry. Haven't been praying, haven't been reading scriptures, and honestly thinking, man, like it's probably got to take something pretty drastic to make me start diving back into this stuff, like the stuff about religion. Because I was visiting cousins the other day, and they were asking me like super simple questions, super simple stuff, like do you believe in heaven and hell, or like all these different things. That as a Christian, it's like, oh yeah, that's an easy answer. But bro, like I have no idea, dude, because there's so many different theories and answers and potential like pros and cons of whatever position, and it's to the point where I'm basically like realistically, I'm basically agnostic again. Where I've always been agnostic, but like this time I was trying to be like Christian agnostic, where it's like, yes, sure, I'm agnostic, but I want to be more Christian. But I haven't really been living those Christian values or Christian beliefs or Christian practices, I think is a better term. And honestly, I think as of right now, like maybe that's the issue, is that it doesn't seem like high enough of a priority for me to actually carve time out and actually dedicate some focus to this. But that's like the super honest update there. And maybe next episode things will change. Maybe they won't. I honestly have no idea. But moving on, update on myself. I would say in terms of myself, actually like pretty great. I'm out here in Hawaii right now. I've been probably the most active this past week than I have in like 2-3 months. Just because being out here, like the weather's phenomenal and it's winter, so I've just been running and hiking. So that's been great. Update on my people. Yeah, being out here, I'm with family, so it's been awesome. And then I'm also out there in Oregon meeting people. Oh, which reminds me, I should give that update of what it was like running into all these people. And there were so many things, but I think the biggest takeaway I had from reuniting with my middle school friends after 8 years, easily the biggest takeaway is that people grow apart, dude. And people are just set on like very different paths. Because yeah, I was like hanging out with them one day and it was great. We're grabbing lunch and they were like funny, we're cracking jokes, it was good, had a good time. But I can't imagine being friends with them. And the reason is because we're just so different now. Like I am on this completely different path that they are, and it's so different. So I think that was like probably the biggest takeaway, was seeing how different we would end up being. Like I'm not sure if I would be the same way I am now if I stayed in Oregon. And I specifically remember like we were at lunch and I asked them this question. And in my head it was like it was a normal question. It was like, "Oh, how do you guys think you've changed the most since middle school?" Because I haven't seen them since middle school. It's like, yeah, easy question. It's like a normal question. And then they like look at me like, oh wow, that's a deep question. I'm like, bro, what? This is a basic question, my guy. And so I asked them that, and then they take a while, they pause, they think about it for a while, and they answer, and they're like, well, not much, honestly. I was like, bro, what? Since middle school, dude? And they're like, yeah, I mean, grown up and become more adult, but like realistically speaking, not much has changed. I was like, dude, that's crazy. And my answer was just like my ambition or my level of drive. Like in middle school is like whatever, like I'm just going by life. Or maybe just that ambition and drive has shifted from school and academics and more toward like work. But man, like the fact he said nothing was like mind boggling to me. So that was a really interesting experience. And there was one guy in particular where I talked with him and it seemed like he would have this like this nugget of drive and ambition, or like this hint of it. And if it were like planted and seeded and given care, that it could grow and he could like really start making something of himself. And I guess like I say all of this and it sounds like I'm being condescending and looking down on them. And maybe I am, and I'm just like not knowing about it. And I'm like that dean who was condescending toward me. But I feel like I say all of this out of a motivation or out of a perspective of like, dang, that sucks. Because in my head, like I think all these people, they have so much potential of what they could be. And I think there's a story of Michael Jordan where he comes to the end of his life and it's like this alternate universe where Michael Jordan didn't win all the rings and he didn't put all that work in. And Michael Jordan, he looks in the mirror of what he could have been at the end of his life. Like, wow, I could have done that. But now saying that out loud, Michael Jordan was honestly a pretty miserable guy. Kind of like David Goggins. I wouldn't say miserable, but it's like, bro worked so hard, and it was like very, very few times where he was like pleased with himself or happy. So he would always just be working. So there's like all these dark sides to ambition and drive. So it comes back to like this idea of balance for sure. But it's just like looking at these people and being like, damn, like you could do so much if you wanted to, if you really like wanted to. But maybe it's like some people just straight up don't want to and don't want to do those trade-offs, which honestly is completely fair. And so maybe I am just like projecting my own values onto them, and I'm like, oh, you should work hard, when really like it's like, no, they're living their life. They would look at me and say I'm working too hard, but I would say the same thing. It's like, oh, I'm just living different values, dude. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. But anyways, last update on my work. So the biggest thing here, I'm finally done with this quarter. So on to the last quarter. Oh, I'm so happy, bro. I turned in my last assignment yesterday, and I was like, I'm free, no more school. So now we're locking back in on work. Like I mentioned, trying to do this UGC stuff, and I'm also trying to do this new like social media stuff and trying to do that series again. So I think the process I thought of actually during this episode, I think I'm gonna start doing. So it's gonna be recording my podcast, and usually I'm walking, so like that'll be like the actual content or the body of the video. But I'm gonna work harder on the hooks, because the hooks are truly what matters. And so if I just have this content is like, oh, this is whatever the video was of me just walking and talking and yapping, but I put more effort into the hook, like hopefully that'll do something. And then honestly, also is just like trying to learn the social media game and editing and stuff, which I think would be valuable, and then also part of like building the personal brand. I think that's always worth doing. So those are the biggest things there. Next week I'm headed back, or not even next week, tomorrow I'm headed back to Utah. So I'm about to go work in person again for about a week, and then Christmas, holidays, and then back to school for my last quarter. Honestly, biggest thing that will throw a wrench in my plan is if I get flagged for AI in these papers, because that would really cook me. And then also if I don't pass one of my classes. So I don't pass it, the one that I got flagged for AI in, which like cut my grade a ton, then that would be super tough because I would have to overload again next quarter. And I really don't want to do that. So those are all the updates. Like I said, I'll just keep pushing forward on everything and catch y'all in the next episode, which will hopefully be in Utah next week, which is when I'll hopefully do the episode on time. I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tatok, see you.